name is Joe Martin. I'm a senior sales engineer here with Novell. Joining me today is Matt Schlavine. He's the technology director at Fox Valley Lutheran High School up in Wisconsin. And the two of us are going to be talking about collaboration, and we both kind of have a passion for this area, and that we've both have exposure to Novell Vibe. Me, obviously, working for Novell. Matt's got that in his district, and we've seen a lot of things that Vibe from Novell can do, and along with a whole host of other products. And so we're trying to just raise awareness, because Vibe in particular, amongst these other products, always have the same visibility that GroupWise and some of the other ones that have bigger names do. And what we've seen in some cases is school districts consider Google Apps and say, hey, we like Google Apps because we can do so many things. And really, that's all being compared to GroupWise and not to everything else. So really the whole purpose of today's webinar is just to give some insight about products we've got in Novell, Vibe, Filer, Messenger, all these other things that are all part of the collaboration family, and how they can benefit your schools first and foremost, and also if you've got demands from faculty, staff saying they wish they could do more than what they're able to do today, about how you could very easily actually give this to them. A couple of quick logistics items before we then get started here is, first of all the phone lines are muted, so if you have any questions, please ask those into the chat window there, and we'll pause periodically and address your questions as they come up. Also, after this session is done, after this webinar, if you want a copy of the presentation, by all means, let me know. You can shoot me an email, and you see my email address up there on the screen, jmartin@novell.com. More than happy to get the presentation to you, or even a recording, because we are recording this webinar today. So with that being said, let's go ahead and kind of kick things off, and as we go through too, you'll hear from Matt, who will talk about again how some of these things have been implemented right in his school and the benefits he has. But let's just give some background on things here, is that, you know, even though there is this demand to move collaboration beyond just email, and teachers talk about Google Apps and Drive and stuff, and we'll talk about kind of the Novell solutions that help with that. At the end of the day, what we see is that when it comes to communications, number one, email is still the most important means above anything else that's available that's out there. And the other thing to go along with that, and this is the statistic I find very interesting, is if we look at this email market in whole, so I'm not talking about education versus government versus manufacturing, but just everybody together that uses email, we see that as of right now, here in 2014, there's only about a 10% market penetration of cloud or hosted email. And by 2020, we'll see that rise, but even then, only maybe about half. That's still a number of years out. And I really like to highlight that, because a lot of times I'll hear from schools, everybody is going to Google. And, you know, the simple matter is not everybody is, or for those that are, there's many that actually do kind of a hybrid approach, which we'll talk about some examples of later on, as far as adopting the cloud, so Google or Microsoft, in addition to on-premise stuff. But we really don't see overall this large number of people going, even though there's a lot of talk about it. It's a hot button topic. So again, just keep that in mind, especially if in your districts you're getting any sort of pressures right now as far as, you know, hey, we need to move away from GroupWise, we need to adopt Google Apps, things like that. You know what, let's have some conversations about what that means and how you can really kind of look at a best breed approach here to make sure you've got all the right products and solutions in your arsenal there, so at the end of the day, faculty, staff, they've got all their tools they need in their teaching toolbox, if you will, versus, you know, kind of just going completely all in one direction versus another. So with that being said, and kind of doing this level set as far as where the industry is in general, let's start to dive into Novell collaboration. And so, you know, at the heart of that is GroupWise, you know, great collaboration platform that's been around now for over 20 years, you know, when we acquired WordPerfect so many years ago. And, you know, we see a lot of people love it. Now there's some other pieces there that not everyone uses. Messenger, we throw that up here because that's a free entitlement. So anyone that has a need for an instant messenger type thing or instant message product, you've got that. If you have GroupWise, you get that automatically, and we'll talk about where that's actually going here pretty soon with some mobile stuff. We've also got the Novell Vibe, which is a very important piece of the puzzle here. And that's the part that I find a lot of people aren't aware of. So for those of you joining today who either have never heard of Vibe or maybe the name sounds familiar but not really sure what it is, I usually like to present it as that is our SharePoint, because a lot of people are familiar with Microsoft SharePoint, and you can kind of think of that in that mentality. However, that doesn't mean that the negatives that come along with talking about SharePoint come with Vibe. With Vibe, first of all, it's not expensive at all to get that added to your licensing agreements. In some cases, some of you may even own this and aren't even aware of it. Anybody here joining today that has the Novell Open Workgroup Suite as part of their school licensing agreement, or if you're higher ed, your academic license agreement, if you have NOWs, you have Vibe. It's there. You just have to implement it and use it. And the other thing, too, when we talk about implementation, it does not typically take the kind of development that we see with Microsoft SharePoint. So when I say it's like SharePoint, I bring it up as far as the type of product it is, but a lot of those negative things don't really apply to Vibe. So Matt, maybe I'll pause for a second. Just in your school there, I mean, how difficult was it for you just to get Vibe kind of up and running?
The actual install of Vibe, Joe, was very easy. It's just ISO, pop it in, run it, and you're up and running. It's not hard to get going. The main thing that we found with it was getting everybody using it. We kind of forced them to by putting out important documents into Vibe on our main Vibe site, so that if they want to see their master schedule, or they want to see the list of lockers, or any of our internal documents, they had to log into Vibe. And once they started doing that, they started using it more and more, and then started finding more things that they wanted to use it for on their own. So it kind of grew from a necessity thing up to this is cool to use this thing.
Cool, cool. Glad to hear it. And that's something that we've seen kind of time and time again, where they're talking schools or even other types of customers. Those that have put in Vibe, oftentimes will get that buy-off, and especially it's important when putting in something new that you don't just necessarily beat everyone over the head and say it's all or nothing. And so you can really turn the tide there, where even though it's something new and users may be hesitant about change, they get this and start enjoying the benefits. Now we'll talk about Vibe a little bit more as we go on what some of those benefits are and things, but I just thought just to bring it up here, when we talk about putting something in, the idea isn't to suggest something that's difficult to install, difficult to get going, or anything like that. And again, we'll also talk about some of the resources that are available to help make it a little bit easier for you. So again, those are just a couple of pieces in the whole portfolio when we talk about collaboration here at Novell. GroupWise, Vibe, which is an important piece, and then we've also got the mobility product that many of you I'm sure use to get email on your phones, and then as we talked about Messenger. Now, another thing to think about with Vibe too is, again, when you've got maybe some teachers that come in and say, hey, I wish we had Google Apps because I can do all these different things with Google Apps. Well, really, the fair comparison should be Google Apps compared to GroupWise, Vibe, GMS Messenger. We'll talk about Filer. There's a whole host of products, because at the end of the day, that's what Google Apps is, right? Google Apps isn't a single product. It's Gmail. It's Google Drive. It's Google Docs. Right? There's a whole number of different pieces that all come together. And so really, by adding a couple of things that maybe you don't have in your licensing, or you don't have installed in your environments today from the Novell side, you can bring the teachers something that they're really asking for. They're asking for that Google version of it because that's what they're most familiar with. But what they're really asking for in most cases is, I want to do more than just email or have calendar. I want to have websites for my classes. and be able to give homework assignments out to students and have an easy way for them to turn in their assignments and things like that. There's a whole host of things that really are what they're asking for, and that's what we say that we can do with the Novell Collaboration family. Now I'm going to kind of skip past this one again, just highlights a lot of the things that are in GroupWise. But one part that I want to highlight, notice how we've got Vibe in there. Reason being is that Vibe itself does have integrations with the GroupWise client. We'll talk a little more about that as we continue on, but just keep in mind it's not like GroupWise needs to be completely separate from Vibe, and that's why on this sort of dartboard slide, if you will, of all these different pieces of GroupWise, we know Vibe as being its own component. But let's deep dive into Vibe, rather, at least on a few areas. So there's a real interesting one, and that's with the with workflows, which you can see off to the right where we note robust workflows. Is I worked with a community college here in Illinois that said, hey Joe, you know, you've got this problem, or we have a travel request process. So if someone, like let's say someone wants to go to BrainShare, and they want to request the funds for airfare, for the hotel to get there, for the conference itself, or maybe they just need to go ahead and get a car to travel somewhere within the state, maybe another conference or something. Today, they said our problem is that it's all paper-based. And so we can't tell what stage it's in, who's approved it yet, who hasn't, unless we just start calling a bunch of different people. And it's just really frustrating. In fact, you know, even the form itself is an old antiquated multi-part form where I fill it out and the yellow copy goes to one person, the pink copy goes to somewhere else. So with all these copies floating around, you just don't know what's happening. So they said, hey, you know, we heard Vibe can help with that. You know, is that true? And how would it work and help us in our environment? So we worked together, and I was able to not start from scratch. I could actually go to what we call the Vibe Resource Library, which has a lot of pre-built forms and workflows and things. And I discovered, oh, we already have a travel request, one that's been built. So I went ahead, downloaded it, imported it in. Then I compared it to what this school was doing. Because what they did is they scanned in a copy of the form that they fill out, so I could at least get an idea of what was the information they were asking for. And I saw that was very similar to the form we had built in our sample one. There were just a couple of additional things I needed to add on to it. Then they also sketched out, they just basically drew out a flow chart, just showing, you know, the process that's involved, the different states and who the different approvals go to and whatnot. And they just scanned that sketch in, and then they emailed that to me. And I saw, well, the workflow we have is extremely basic. It doesn't cover most of it. So I at least had something to start with, though. But then I started working on it, and I made changes, got it close to what they wanted. But they said, you know, how about can you do this and this in it? Sent it on to some interns that we had. They made some adjustments, sent it back, showed this community college, said this is great, this is exactly what we need. So they wind up adding it to their ALA, adding Vibe to their ALA, so simply because of that workflow process, because they saw how much time they were going to save with that, and then that already got them brainstorming about other processes they could start automating using the workflows. So I found it very interesting that something you might think might be more oriented towards, you know, commercial organizations, businesses and stuff, here's a community college that could take advantage of it. And I'm sure something like that could be used in any kind of K-12 district. And that's just one tiny piece of Vibe. You can see all this other stuff that's out there. Like, you know, the workspaces are great, so every class can have their own, you know, different workspace, if you will. It's like their own kind of website. And that way teachers can use that to give information to students, even to parents, because you can expose this to people outside the district. You know, I don't recall if I ever asked you, Matt, do you have parents or anybody that's not, you know, not a faculty, staff, or student that comes in and never gets information from your Vibe environment?
Oh, absolutely. We actually post a public Vibe site for our parents to see things like our morning announcements and even things that are going up on our message boards. We run those as an RSS feed through Vibe, and parents can actually see our public message boards from home, which anybody could see if they walk into our building as well. But we use Vibe for more than just that. The other thing that we really hit is the content management. We were heavy GroupWise document management users. We had over 50,000 documents in GroupWise, and as you know, that piece has been dropped from GroupWise. So we made the move. It took us a year, but we have all of our documents now into the Vibe document management. And the teachers just love the fact that they can get at their documents in such a wide variety of ways. With the group-wise web access, you basically could read your document, and that was it. You couldn't put it back, you couldn't edit it unless you emailed it back to yourself. With Vibe, you can get at it through a simple web page. You can get at it through a plug-in for Microsoft Office. You can get at it through the Vibe desktop. They can access their documents, and smartphone users can actually edit on the fly live Vibe documents on their phone. So the teachers are just loving the accessibility, much, much greater than they had with just the group-wise document management.
Yeah, so there's definitely a lot of different benefits there and use cases. And I saw a note here of someone raising their hand, and it looks like Charity might have done that. So Charity, if you've got a question, please go ahead and type that into the chat or the questions window, and then we will get to your question. So please definitely go ahead and just type that in. So yeah, those are just a few sample ways of looking at how to leverage Vibe. So there's a whole lot more that you could do with it. In fact, one more that I'll highlight, and then we'll kind of continue on. We mentioned social tools on the left. As we actually had an interesting comment about a K through 12, or from, I should say, a K through 12 district, probably about maybe 3 years ago or so, that had implemented Vibe. And one of the things that they noted was that Vibe was actually going to be used to help sharpen social networking skills for their students. And when I first read it, I thought, why? And then, of course, I continued reading on. And it really makes sense that in this day when these students go to college, or when college students go to the workforce, you're going to have a number of different social networking tools available. Like actually I see, for those of you, I don't know how many of you followed the Novell Facebook page, but that's actually a guy in our marketing department that goes in and updates that Facebook page because it's a way to reach a lot of people. There's a lot of different social media websites out there, different tools, and it's important for people to learn how to leverage those things. And so we actually, again, had one customer in particular commented that they wanted to start preparing students for doing something like that. So with that, it looks like, can't tell if we have a question. Matt, do you see a question having come in? My window's acting a little funny for me.
Yeah, I answered it and hit send to all, so I'm hoping everybody saw the answer to it.
Okay, nope, we should be good then. We should be good. Thank you. All right, so let's talk about some of this integration, and this is the part where when we talk about the integrations, and we're going to talk more about the Office plugin that Matt mentioned a little while ago, where it really starts to bring in this story of what people love about Google and being able to do some of that stuff right here using your existing tools. But first of all, I'd like to highlight is the fact that it's not like you have to have users going off to some completely separate interface to use Vibe. In other words, if I live in the GroupWise client all day, that doesn't mean that I need to go out and be in Firefox or some web browser to be doing stuff in Vibe and I'm having to switch back and forth. You can see this screenshot, and this is a live screenshot actually of my client connected to our production GroupWise system here at Novell, and I'm accessing our Vibe environment. So right there you can see I can access all my different workspaces and folders and things like that right within the GroupWise client. And if I were to switch back, look at some of my other folders in my cabinet and stuff, I would still see those Vibe folders just be at the very bottom of the list below the cabinet. So the point is I can be in a single interface and get access to all my information. It doesn't really matter where it is. And even just trying to find it. Let's say there's something, and I remember it was in an email somewhere that I can't remember if I kept that email or maybe I had actually dragged and dropped it to put it into Vibe. I just remember a word or phrase that was in it. I can actually search both my mailbox and Vibe at the same time. And I can also do them separately if I'd like to, but the point of it is that I don't have to, again, worry about treating them as two different areas that I manage differently. Not only do I access my information within the GroupWise client, but I can also go ahead and search all the Vibe information right from within the GroupWise client And essentially what happened is in my search results window, the top half is going to show any results that match that are somewhere in GroupWise. The bottom half are going to show the same thing that matches in Vibe. And keep in mind, this is also configurable by the administrator. So if you don't want the integrations for any reason, you don't have to enable them. Or if you're just going to be adding Vibe to your environment and you're afraid that, a lot of people who don't know what Vibe is, beyond maybe a pilot group, are going to kind of freak out saying, what's this extra stuff showing up in my client? You can also turn these integrations on a user-by-user basis. So again, it's a great way of kind of staging the rollout of turn this integration on for a group of early adopters or a testing group, whatever you want to call them. And then once your tests are done and you want to roll this out further, then you can start doing it at a post office level or at a domain level, again, whatever that makes the most sense for your environment. Now, moving beyond, though, the GroupWise client is where we get some real neat stuff from Microsoft Office. And this is the part that I really love to highlight because, again, what I hear a lot of times is, oh, Google Docs is great and Google Apps is great because Google Docs is in there. Well, what's so great about it? Well, I can share files. Well, I can do that with Vibe and Filer. And then I can allow, my students to go and edit these documents simultaneously. I can do that right here with Vibe. And the neat thing here is that most of you probably already have Microsoft Office. So it's not like this requires additional licensing because at the end of the day, yeah, Google Docs is part of Google Apps, but also keep in mind that is just a basic word processor, spreadsheet, presentation program. And while, I had this discussion with someone a little while back saying, well, we shouldn't be teaching the tool, we should be teaching the concepts, and they can use whatever tool they want when they graduate, go to a workplace, whatever. So I understand that at the same time, if the tool I'm using to teach the concepts is limiting, in other words, if I'm using Google Docs to teach how to do word processor stuff, well, are my students fully prepared? And it's not to say that Google is bad. It just means that if you have Microsoft Office, why not leverage it since it's fully functional and there's a good chance that's what they would ultimately use in the workplace. And then if I can just add the Vibe functionality into there, now it's the best of both worlds. They get this comprehensive learning tool, and yet they're still able to access all this information that's in the environment, multiple people editing documents, all this other stuff that goes along with it. So in the screenshot, you can see there that we get this Vibe tab that comes by installing this plugin, supports Office 2010, Office 2013. And in fact, you'll actually see both of them in use. We'll do just a brief demonstration a little bit later on. And once I access a document that's stored in Vibe, you can see where I get this little dashboard on the right side. Shows me the version I'm on because we support versioning, which is great to be able to go back and look at it, an older version to see what changes someone made. I can go ahead and do comments and tags and things like that. But, one of the big things there is just the versioning aspect. And so what will happen then, where we leverage that versioning, is let's say I'm working on a document, Matt's working on a document. While I have it open, Matt goes and makes a change, then I will actually get prompted, and you can see this up here. Do I want to take the changes that Matt made and go ahead and merge them in? Do I want to review them first? And when we review, we're just using the built-in functionality that's already in Microsoft Office, the review function there. And I've got additional options there where I could say, you know what, just discard what I've done because Matt actually has the right stuff, or I could even say, Matt should have never been allowed to do this. I forgot to remove his access, so dump his changes and just keep it with what I'm working on. So a lot of flexibility, and again, a lot of that's determined by the administrator to set a lot of those permissions that are out there. So Matt, I'm going to bring this up to you because I think, if I remember right, you had kind of an interesting story as far as comparing that sort of real-time editing that you have available in Google Docs versus this sort of editing that we make available with Office and Vibe.
Yeah, they're both good methods. The Google Doc one, of course, is the fact that as you are typing changes, everybody else sees the changes that you're typing. And what happened that we noticed in the classroom is if kids were collaborating on a document and they all had instantaneous access to that document, it kind of devolved into a kind of goof around session where one kid's typing and another kid's trying to erase what he's typing, and then they type something silly and they're trying to figure out who typed it, and again, it has its place, but it seems like you get more done if you're just working on it on your own and then merging in one of the others. That's just what we found out to be true.
Yep, and of course everyone's experience will be different, and I definitely understand that, but I just think it's interesting to hear, at least what one school in particular, Matt's school in this case, actually found when they, enabled users to do this real-time editing that you have available in Google Docs versus the way we handle it. And ours is, I like to say, it's near real-time. So going back to the example from the screenshot, I'm editing a document, Matt's editing it, he makes a change. It's not like it takes a while for this prompt to come up for me to see that he made a change. It's, I usually tell customers 30 seconds just to kind of give a little buffer. We're probably talking more like 10 or 15 seconds. So again, it's one of those things that, getting multiple people to edit a document simultaneously is a good thing. Definitely there's a lot of benefit in there, but you just have to look at how is that implemented, and is it potentially implemented in a way that could cause issues, right? That could actually detract from the learning process and now actually create a disciplinary situation. So it's something to keep in mind. We can go ahead and address, and again, the main thing is in your environment, you need to have Microsoft Office to make this happen, and in most cases, most of you probably already do. All right, so I'm going to pause real quick before we start talking about some of the other pieces in here. Have you seen anything else come up, Matt, or from a questions aspect, or are we good right now?
No, I haven't. I did answer that one, but I don't see my answer out there, so I'm hoping everybody got it.
All right. Do you mind just in case it only went to that person who asked it, do you mind just repeating the question and the answer, and that way we'll make sure everybody has it?
Sure. The question that was asked was, could they get the URL for our public Vibe site that we let our parents and stuff see? And this is the site that has our message board announcements and things that are not confidential to our school that if you walked into the building you'd see. And that site, if you didn't get it, is fvlvibe.fvlhs.org.
All right, cool. Thank you very much, Matt. All right, so let's cover, a couple of other things too, just to keep in mind, that goes along with all this. Again, we've got our mobility service. For those of you that are using it, it's a way to go ahead and get your information synchronized, from group-wise over to your mobile devices. The other thing that kind of goes along with this, which is an interesting discussion, is that for those of you that maybe have been using this for a while, remember it used to be called Data Synchronizer, and then we just renamed it the Group-Wise Mobility Service with the 2.0 release. Well, we still have the old sort of general purpose Data Synchronizer product, because initially we said it's a way to sync information from one area to another, but what we saw was most people, like 99%, were using it to get their email to their phones, or email contacts account, I should say, to their phones. So we said, well, let's just make it easier, and that's what GMS has done. And as we continue down that path, the mobility piece, we're going to make that simpler and simpler as far as how to install it and configure things like that, changing the kind of the underlying architecture a little bit. However, that original Data Synchronizer product did have a Vibe connector that actually allows you to take calendaring and tasks from Vibe and actually sync those automatically to GroupWise. So we have some customers that do that. I also have a customer that they go into GroupWise and just subscribe to their Vibe calendars via iCal. But the nice thing, if you do it using the Vibe connector, is now if I tie in then GMS to the phones, I can actually take a calendar from Vibe, automatically sync that to GroupWise, and then from there automatically sync it to the phones. So again, if I am going to put in Vibe and potentially do some of the calendaring aspects, it doesn't mean now I've got two different calendars that I have to access two different ways. I could actually get all of that right onto a single device. Another thing I'll highlight, we've got an upcoming 2.1 release that's got some enhancements. There's some neat things around mobility stuff, but it also introduces Outlook support. So for those of you that maybe are getting some pushback saying, we would love Outlook, and maybe that's making you think about Office 365 rather than Google Apps. And again, Office 365 has SharePoint and some of the other stuff we're talking about. Obviously, you could add Vibe in and say, well, hey, we've got a story that is just as good, if not better, than Office 365. But also with this new version of GMS, we'll actually have an initial first look, we're calling it, of our implementation of Outlook 2013 support because Microsoft added ActiveSync support to Outlook 2013. So the reason I bring that up again, if you're leaning at potentially making a change because you've got users, maybe a superintendent or a business manager or somebody like that that says, I have to use Outlook, that's actually coming very soon here where you'll be able to have Outlook going to a GroupWise backend by way of the GroupWise mobility service.
Joe, we have a question. Integrations with Microsoft Office 2010 and 2013 were mentioned. How does it work with Office 2011 on Macs? I do not know the answer to that. Do you?
Sure. So unfortunately right now the plugin is strictly for Office on Windows, so it does not support Office on Mac. It's not to say that that won't change in the future, but for now it does require the Windows version of Office. Good question though. Any other questions, Matt? Or?
For now, nope.
Nope.
Thank you,
All right,
Eric.
cool.
The URL is visible. Thank you.
All right. So talking about a couple other pieces in the collaboration aspect, we've also got Messenger 3.0, which we're working on right now and be released soon. So, for those of you that use Messenger, you'll actually get this great benefit of having mobile apps available soon for Android, for iOS, even for BlackBerry 10, if you've got some users with BlackBerries. Android, iOS, obviously, is what we typically see in schools. And so for those of you that aren't using it, I definitely encourage you to look at this because you've got integrations with Messenger and the GroupWise client, Messenger and Vibe, so I can see my presence information to see if someone is online, away, busy, from either GroupWise or Vibe. And then I can also even go ahead and start in a IM conversation. So using either of those, if I have the Messenger application installed, it'll go ahead and fire off a new conversation window accessing the locally installed Messenger. Excuse me, the screenshots you see there. Was there a question?
Yeah, we have another question. The question is from James. If we don't have GroupWise, does Exchange snap in?
So you can use Exchange with Vibe. So the tight integrations we have are going to be with GroupWise because obviously we'd love for you to use our products. But at the end of the day, we can do what we call sort of loose integrations because first of all, we can tie into Active Directory via LDAP so that users' credentials that they already use to log into Exchange or just each other Windows desktops is used to log into Vibe. And then we can go ahead using iCal and SMTP and things like that, again, get some of those loose integrations. So at the end of the day, I guess that what I want to get across is you don't need GroupWise to use Vibe, and we definitely have plenty of customers that use Vibe without GroupWise. But if you are an existing GroupWise customer, adding Vibe in, gives you that additional level of collaboration not available on its own. So that's kind of the long answer there. That's a great question, though. Touching on Messenger real quick, you see screenshots of the mobile clients. I do want to highlight that we've also updated the desktop clients. I don't think, couldn't recall if I had a slide on that, so I do not have a slideshow on that, but again, the OS X and the Windows clients also being updated with this new release. And the thing about this, too, is, I saw one school district talk about this with internal policies. They're worried about cyberbullying, which is another one of those kind of big topics that's going on right now. And they're actually saying, students are not allowed to do text messages to each other. Now, could they still do it? Yes, and the idea is to discipline them if they do. But what they're saying is they actually want to enforce their students to use Novell Messenger as soon as the mobile clients are available, because then at that point, I can have central archiving of all those messages, make it very easy for me to go in and track a case if one is reported of cyberbullying. So just keep that in mind, that Messenger can really be a very useful tool, in an academic environment.
Joe, we have another question.
Yes.
Is there any information on future direction for Vibe? It's been a while since there last has been an upgrade, and I know that is true, and people have been waiting. I've been waiting patiently for the next version, and maybe, Joe, you can fill us in a little on when that's going to be out.
Sure. So the next release, which it's got the code name of Hudson, is actually slated for release the first part of 2015. And with that, we've got a completely revamped UI. And essentially what you're going to see first and foremost, maybe I'll backtrack for a second. So for those of you that are familiar with both Vibe and Filer, you know that Filer is built on the Vibe architecture. And so what's happened now is that we're taking a lot of the enhancements that were done with Filer to improve the UI and things like that, and we're bringing that into Vibe first and foremost. So that's going to make it easier to, for instance, share content. So if I've got an item in a blog or anything else in Vibe that I would like to share internally or externally, we're taking the concept of file sharing that's in Filer, make it easy to share any of that content right out of Vibe. Like I said, we've updated the UI itself. We've got a number of changes that are out there. In fact, I probably should have pulled up a roadmap slide. Let's go through some of this stuff, and then I should be able to pull up a BrainShare presentation that was done and just quickly show a couple of the Vibe pieces there that are in that next release. So yes, so those of you using Vibe already, wondering when am I going to get the next version, that's going to be available to you before too much longer now. I know there's been a long wait, and again, some really good enhancements in that Vibe 4.0. Well, I kind of gave that out. I was supposed to call it Hudson, but the Vibe 4.0 release. So yeah, definitely be on the lookout for that. All right. So let's talk about a couple more pieces, and then we can go ahead and take the last part for some questions, a brief demo, and like I said, we'll see about kind of do an ad hoc pull-up of that other BrainShare presentation. So the other thing I want to bring up, again, is the files aspect, because the other thing I hear a lot of is, Google Drive is where we need to be. We need to use Google Drive. And so, again, not everyone is aware of Filer, so I'd like to highlight that it's not in the collaboration family. I think that's the last piece to the mix here of all these different products that really now bring home that sort of Google experience, if you will, using on-premise solutions from Novell. We've already talked about GroupWise, Vibe, Messenger, the mobility service, but Filer is an important part. Because at the end of the day, I hear a lot of people love Google Drive. I can go ahead and easily share stuff out and things like that. I could be at home, get access to my information. So we say, there's no reason you shouldn't be able to do this, but from an IT perspective, it would be nice to keep a lot of that stuff on premise. And even if you look at it from an end user perspective, if I'm a teacher that's been in the district for 10 years or 20 years, I probably have a lot of files sitting out there. And if I want to use Google Drive for all of that, that is going to be very painful for me to go and take all those files, those potentially thousands of files, and upload all of that into Google Drive. Well, that's the great thing about Filer, is that there's no need to go in and do that. I can go ahead and now just get that instant access. And I've really been talking to a number of schools about this. In fact, very recently, I think it was just either last week or the week before, my days kind of all blend together now. I was in Indiana for a conference. It's this big conference called HEC that's for all the K-12 districts in the state. And I spoke with a number of schools that would come and say, oh, we used to use Novell, we don't anymore. I'd say, well, are you a Google App Shop? Yes. Do your users love Google Drive? Yes. Has it been a pain to try to get them older files into Google Drive? Yes. So I say, well, let's talk about Filer. In some cases, that's the only thing we're talking about. We don't even start talking about Vibe or anything else. Because I say, you know what, I can drop Filer in, and again, to the question someone had earlier about Exchange, so I'm assuming this is a Windows AD environment. I can drop Filer into that environment just as easy as I can into a Novell environment. Same way with Vibe, I can throw Vibe into a Microsoft environment or Novell environment. So by putting Filer out there, I'm not saying use Filer instead of Google Drive. I'm saying that use it as something that goes right alongside with Google Drive. Now, I don't want to spend a ton of time talking about the architecture, so quickly, high level, it's a virtual appliance that works in a VMware environment or Hyper-V environment or the Zen open source virtualization. I've spoken to a number of districts that do not virtualize yet, and I say, well, if that's the case, it doesn't mean you have to buy a virtualization solution. As long as you have some spare hardware, an extra box laying around somewhere, you can install the free version of VMware on there. I believe Microsoft has a free flavor of Hyper-V. So, and of course, the Zen open source one is free. As long as I have hardware, I can throw a free virtualization solution on it and then begin using Filer. Back-end points to either AE Directory or Active Directory and your file servers. Front-end, tons of different clients available. You can see that supporting Windows, OS X, iOS, Android, BlackBerry, and of course we've also got a web front end. Not listed in there though, that should be is Windows Phone. We've also got an app there for Windows Phone that I didn't have listed in here. So a number of different ways to get access to files. So with that, I'll pause for a second. Have we had any other questions, Matt?
Nope, no other questions.
All right, and then I guess a question I have for you. If I remember, you guys use Filer as well as Vibe, correct?
Yes, we do, and we use it for the teachers, of course, to get at their documents, but this has become our replacement for net storage as well, and we give it to all of our students as well. An interesting case that gets used that I'm real familiar with is my wife teaches art here at the school, and she has a photography course that she teaches. And with photography, of course, you have kids taking pictures off campus. Now you got to get that picture onto your network drive so that you can use Photoshop to manipulate it. So she gives them an assignment to take pictures, and then Monday we'll use Photoshop. Well, over the weekend, those kids really don't have any excuse now for not getting those pictures from their camera up to the network drive, because Filer is just very easy to use from any number of platforms.
Yeah, great thank you for that story. You know, two other quick ones that I've heard some schools tell me about. One was a school where there were students in a geology class that took a field trip, and they were taking pictures of, I guess it would be rocks because it was geology. And anyways, there are a few students who weren't able to go on the field trip, but they weren't actually left out because the students, while on the field trip, they were taking pictures and immediately uploading via Filer using the app on their phone, so that way the students who are still sitting in the classroom couldn't go on a field trip are still being able to be a part of the field trip, seeing what they're seeing and being able to be a part of that experience, even though physically they're in two completely different areas. So I thought that was, you know, a real neat thing. The other one was a neat story I got from a school up in Wisconsin that it was actually a use case that one of the teachers gave, because he said he teaches a few subjects, and first of all, it's helped him to just stay on top of everything because how busy he's been by teaching. I think it's 3 or 4 classes this year. But even more so, what's important for him in particular, he also coaches 3 different sports, and he actually takes his iPad out into the field while coaching and is able to pull up files that are actually showing like different plays and things like that, and use it as part of his coaching process. So he said between using that for coaching as well as using it for just keeping up with all of his lesson plans and stuff, he said without Filer he wouldn't have even been able to keep up with his workload this year. So that was a neat one. So, and we'll, you know, we're going to start up some more of these webinars come first part of next year. So definitely we'll have some more that really do deeper dives into Filer and some of our other mobile solutions. So won't try to focus a whole bunch on them. But what I do want to go ahead is quickly talk about some customers and what they've done. Millikan University is a neat one where they looked at trying to move to a cloud solution, and they looked at both Office 365 and Google Apps, since both of those are considered free for education. I say considered because ultimately there are other ancillary costs that people don't think about, like costs to migrate your data to that system. There's some retraining, things like that. They said, you know, in our case, hey, we even have a lot of our processes wrapped around GroupWise. So for them, over about a 5-year period, it's going to cost $35,000 to try to move to something. And in fact, I've got their spreadsheet if anyone wants to see it, where they're actually breaking that down, so you can see Office 365 costing $35K versus just sticking with what they have and upgrading to the latest version, which at the time was GroupWise 2012, and I know as of today they're even looking at upgrading again to 2014. So they were happy with that. They're an interesting hybrid approach because it doesn't mean that they didn't leverage Office 365 at all. They said we want to get out of the business of giving students home directories. So students now all of their files are being stored in Office 365. They're using OneDrive, but they're implementing Filer to go ahead and give access to the faculty and staff for them to access their home directories. So they're saying, you know, Office 365 in some places makes sense, but we've got group-wise across the board for everybody. I can't recall, I believe they use a Messenger. I'd have to double check, but I know they also are doing Filer for some of them. So it's a real neat one. Mukwanago is another interesting one that wound up moving away from us completely in 2012 because prior to that they were running older versions of our different products, and they were nervous since we've been acquired by the attachment group of staying with us. So they wound up moving away rather than upgrading to get current, implemented a lot of open source technologies, and found that while licensing went to $0, they had tons and tons of support issues, so overall costs went up. So summer 2013, they came back, implemented a whole slew of products, which you see listed there, and that doesn't even include all of it. They also added storage manager and identity management. And then Vibe is also part of their licensing, which they've been looking at trying to get that going. It's just that they had such a huge process that summer that they ran out of time. And I know this past summer they had a lot of infrastructure upgrades because there's a lot of electronic testing and things that are happening in Wisconsin. So Vibe is now one of the other pieces that they're looking at getting added into the mix. And another real interesting one, and this will also have a flavor of Microsoft and Novell in here, but first of all, starts off, they're a Google shop. They had moved to Google at some point in the past, had new IT staff and administration come in and said, you know what, we're really kind of concerned here about the security implications of doing everything via Google, everything in the cloud. And so they wind up moving away from Google. So this thought that everybody's moving to Google, here's an example of someone moving away from them. Now in their case, they wound up implementing Windows AD Exchange. One piece that was missing, though, was a replacement for Google Drive because Microsoft really doesn't have anything like that. OneDrive for Business is nothing at all like Google Drive or Filer or anything. And at the end of the day, they wind up adding Filer into the mix. So again, this just shows how you definitely don't have to have the full Novell stack. So I'm going to again go back to the question someone had earlier, can we use Vibe in an Exchange environment? Most definitely. You don't have to use all of our stuff. If you use all of our stuff, sure, there's some tighter integrations that you can get. But at the end of the day, you can pick any one or multiple pieces of the Novell portfolio here and get it added into your environments very easily. I know we're running a little short on time, so I want to go ahead and continue with a few more things here, and then we'll see what we're doing. Quickly, I just love to show this slide because the other question I get sometimes is, you know, I'm having trouble finding something to integrate with GroupWise. We have a ton of partners that work with us today, so I'd say that ultimately if you're looking to get something integrated into a GroupWise Vibe environment and that particular vendor maybe doesn't offer Novell support, talk to us because there's a good chance there's another vendor that actually does have a similar solution that will work for you. So tons of ones. This is just a sampling. I mean, we've got more partners than this, but again, I'd just like to highlight a lot of the partners that are out there. So to kind of summarize all that stuff, at the end of the day, you know, what does all of this mean? First of all, you're not held back from supporting the latest technologies. So whether we're talking the latest server operating systems between, you know, SLES and Windows, if you're talking the latest Windows operating systems, of course I didn't highlight OS X, but you know, using those, all that's available, Android, Chromebooks, all this stuff, you can leverage our different solutions in those areas, right? So sometimes I'll find customers that wind up moving away, and I found out, well, it's because they're running a real old version of GroupWise. Well, as long as you stay current with GroupWise and Vibe and all of our other products, you can stay current with all the other technologies that kind of come around all of that. And then, you know, you'd have the same, obviously, issue in a Microsoft environment or any other kind of environment. Anytime you have on-premise solutions, if you don't update them for 8 or 9 years, sure, you'll have some issues. But if you move to the cloud, say, well, we'll just do that so we don't have to worry about updates. Well, first of all, then you have absolutely no control over the updates. So now if Google says we want to roll out an update, everybody gets it. Sure, they have the way to control, like when you subscribe to Labs features. When they ultimately move something out of Labs to the general feature set, you know, then at that point you're kind of stuck. And I've seen some cases where Google actually introduced some changes to Gmail and then within a couple of weeks had to actually back those out. In fact, I remember a problem they had with the Gmail app on Android at one point where they got rid of, I think it was the delete button, and all you could do was archive messages, but you couldn't delete them. And so they quickly got an update out there to put that back on. if you're running on-premises solutions, you determine when you want to upgrade. Sure, we'll say that, if you're 2 or 3 versions back and you run into a problem, you need to upgrade. But the point is, you still choose when you do any of those processes. And of course, beyond just the upgrade, users always have access to their information. There's no worry about, a backhoe cutting a piece of fiber, taking anything down. And of course, probably what's even more important is that you've got complete control over this data, versus, when it's out of your hands in a cloud infrastructure. And then the other thing I'll hear is, well, why should we keep using Novell, right? Is Novell even relevant? Well, we most definitely are. And, I'll just right away jump to the last 2 bullet points. So we've been doing some of this for a little while now. The collaboration stuff we've been doing for over 20 years. And then if you look at how long just we've been in the kind of the networking space dealing with file and print, I mean, we've been doing that for over 30 years, since the early 1980s. So we definitely know how to do all of this stuff. And if you're using any of our products today, again, rather than going through all the disruption to move all that, to say we're going to get rid of file servers and go to Google Drive, why not just keep your file servers, add Google Drive so that people have access to it, and then add Filer to the mix, right? Or add Messenger or Vibe or any of these products and get some additional platforms that you can now start supporting. Because at the end of the day, Google obviously is going to be big on supporting Android, big on supporting Chromebooks, but beyond that, doesn't mean they don't support other devices, but you may see that they're not as equal, whereas for us, we definitely see Android, iOS being equal. We've also been ramping up Mac support as of late, although I know there was the thing about the plugin, but a lot of Mac support and obviously PC support. And then also note that I brought up earlier, if you're going to teach students word processing skills or spreadsheet skills, instead of using just a basic application for that, use a full-fledged application that really is going to teach them all those skills that they need to have, especially if you already own all of that. And of course, finally, one thing here is if you're worried about mobility, we have a whole thing there with iPrint and ZenWorks Mobile Management we could talk about, which we really didn't address today. So with that, I'm going to pause, and I know I talked about the Vibe Hudson piece, so although I didn't have it in that spreadsheet, let me see if I can't find something. While I do that, Matt, any other questions that we've had come in by any chance?
Nope. We're question-free right now.
Question-free. All right. So what I'm going through here for everyone is I'm just looking for, it was a futures presentation that was done by our product management folks. I think it's this one. Let's see if I remember the file name. Oh, nope, endpoint management. That's what I get for trying to do this on the fly. I know it's one of these guys. Collaboration. All right. So, and again, this was something that was presented at BrainShare, so some of you may have seen this if you were at BrainShare, but if not, I'll highlight this. Let me go into presentation mode so I can show a couple of these pieces. So again, our roadmaps, the next release of Messenger, GMS, very right around the door. Cornell's the next version of GroupWise, so that's going to be next summer, and some great enhancements, especially for Mac. But you see Novell 5 4.0, so we have announced it, so I guess I haven't given away any trade secrets. They're calling it 4.0. Some things there, so you can see sharing, which I talked about, UI updates, and then also where we've improved our web dev support and a couple other things. I believe we have a slide, that kind of goes into it a little more detail. So essentially, we've enhanced the mobile piece as well, among the other things that I've talked about. Made it easier to drag and drop files. So anyone that's leveraged Filer knows that we have a nice HTML5 control that gets put into Vibe 4.0, so you don't have to use that old Java-based control anymore. We make it easier to deal with multiple entries there. So if you need to, download multiple files, or you need to make security changes on multiple entries, things like that, we support that. So that gives you just a little sampling of some of the stuff that's coming in that next release. All right. With that, let's go ahead and just highlight then the Office stuff. So that's what I want to show, and I'm going to pull up my copy of Office. So hopefully you guys can see this fairly well. I've got this virtual machine here. I've got Office 2010 installed on it with the Vibe plugin, and I'm accessing this particular document here, and what I'm just calling an admissions document. I'm on version 2.3. And then over here, this is my locally installed version of Office. You can see this is Office 2013. again, accessing that same document. And you can see there's some comments and tags and stuff like that. But again, just to show, the changes and how quickly we see that, I am testing my way. Making one more change. Nothing too terribly exciting, but we'll just go ahead and just make a change so you can see what's going on. A little animation, which may not come across very well while it's updating. And now we can see it's on version 2.4. And so even calling it 10 or 15 seconds, I might be building in buffer because I don't know if you saw how quickly that came up. And sure enough, it shows me that Adam made an update to it. I can merge that stuff in. I can go ahead and just discard what I've done, things like that. So I'm going to go ahead and just merge his changes in. Notice, by the way, it's in red now to let me know that 2.3 is an older version because 2.4 is the current one. So I'll just go ahead and merge those changes in. And now there you go. Those changes just suddenly appeared. Again, I could have reviewed them, but just for the sake of time, since we're near the top of the hour, I went ahead and accepted those changes. And you can see here now where I am on the same version as Adam 2.4. All those older versions are still out there, though. You can see going back to the very initial one, 1.0. By the way, just as a side note, when it went up from 1.5 to 2.0, that was because I actually hit this button here to increment the major version number. So again, you've got control over that. You've got control over how many versions are allowed to be out there. In my demo environment, I don't limit that at all, but I could come up in a production environment, say I only want 5 versions or 10 versions or something like that out there, so that it just doesn't go on and on forever and have 50 versions because all these people are working on it, making changes. So again, shows you the way that we can do that co-editing. So it's 2 people with the same document open at the same time, able to both make changes, but yet it gets around some of the potential downsides of the real-time editing, like Matt was talking about that he's seen in his district with Google Apps. So with that, let's pause for just another second here. And do you see any other questions, Matt, that have come through?
One just popped up, Joe. The question is from Oscar: when is this versioning going to be make into Filer? With a little wink and a nod.
So we do have versioning capability on the roadmap for Filer. So talk about the architecture real quick. The one key difference is when I'm doing this versioning, that's document stored within Vibe. We have complete control over it. Obviously, Filer is pointing at existing file systems, which is a little different versus this own system that you have complete control over. So there's some things that we're deciding exactly how the versioning is going to be implemented in Filer because of that. But it is on the roadmap, I can tell you that. I don't have a specific time frame yet, but it's definitely a very commonly requested feature.
Definitely something we would use. Our teachers really love the versioning that's in Vibe. And like I said, we've got 50,000 documents we've moved over there, so it gets used quite a bit.
Sure. Well, and that's something because I actually had a conversation with product management and the engineering manager at BrainShare. Does it mean we bring versioning natively in Filer, or is it something that in order to get versioning in Filer, you have to integrate Filer with Vibe? I mean, these are things that are still being decided, but just keep that in mind too. As these products go forward, we're going to look at what are ways that we can tie these things together. So between Filer and GroupWise and Vibe, get all this stuff tied together more than what you see today. So definitely all things for consideration. With that, any other questions?
That's not a question, it's a comment. Just Bob Martins from Minnesota said, thanks for the work, guys, and thanks for the discussion at BrainShare. I'd never met Bob before, but I did run into him at the TTP convention and at BrainShare. So thank you, Bob.
Yep, and same here. I met Bob as well at BrainShare, so it was a pleasure being able to put a face to a name. And with that, I think we have hit our time slot here. It looks like we're at the top of the hour. So again, thank you very much. If you'd like a copy of the deck, please let me know. I'm happy to get that to you. Or if you'd like a copy of the recording of this, let me know, and that recording should be available within a couple days. Matt, thank you very much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me, Joe.
All right, cool. And with that, I wish everyone a great day and a great Thanksgiving, especially for those of you here in the United States. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.